Ladies and gentlemen, we need to have a serious conversation about what is unfolding in the Middle East right now. Because the story you're hearing in much of the Western media is that the United States and Israel are winning, that Iran is on the brink of collapse, that regime change is just around the corner. But if you step back and analyze the strategic realities, the picture looks very different. In fact, I believe that when this war is over, it will not end badly for Iran. It will end badly for the United States and for Israel. Iran is not a fragile state that can simply be bombed into submission. It is one of the world's oldest civilizational nations. Its identity stretches back thousands of years. Empires have risen and fallen in that region, but Persia, modern Iran, has endured through them all. So the idea that if you simply remove a few leaders or destroy enough infrastructure, the country will suddenly collapse and become friendly to Washington is a fantasy. There is no evidence for it, historically or politically. In reality, the opposite is far more likely. When wars devastate a society, when bombs fall, when families lose homes, when people see foreign powers attacking their country, the result is not gratitude. It is anger. It is nationalism. It is a determination to never allow that humiliation to happen again. And that brings us to one of the most dangerous consequences of this war. For decades, the stated goal of U.S. policy has been to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. But the strategy we've chosen may actually guarantee that outcome. Think about the lesson this conflict sends to the rest of the world. If you are a country without nuclear weapons, you can be threatened, sanctioned, infiltrated, and attacked. But if you possess nuclear weapons, you are largely untouchable. That lesson is obvious. Countries look at North Korea, which has nuclear weapons, and they notice something important. No one is planning regime change there. No one is launching massive bombing campaigns. So the conclusion many governments will reach is simple. Nuclear weapons are the ultimate insurance policy. If Iran emerges from this conflict with a new leadership structure, perhaps even a nationalist government rather than a religious one, there is a very real possibility that they will move quickly to build nuclear weapons. And ironically, the policies designed to prevent that outcome may be exactly what pushes them toward it. But the strategic consequences do not stop there. Another issue at the center of this conflict is the dispute over nuclear enrichment. Under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, Iran actually has the legal right to enrich uranium for peaceful purposes. Things like energy production and scientific research. Yet Western negotiators have often insisted that Iran should not have that capability at all. From a diplomatic perspective, that is a dangerous precedent. Because if international treaties only apply when they are convenient for powerful countries, then eventually other nations will stop trusting those agreements altogether. International law begins to lose its credibility. And once that credibility disappears, diplomacy becomes far more difficult. Now let's move beyond diplomacy and talk about the military reality on the ground. This conflict is not one-sided. Iran has demonstrated that it retains significant military capability. Missile strikes have reached Israeli territory. Regional bases have been targeted. And American forces in the Gulf have already experienced attacks. The notion that Iran will quickly run out of missiles or lose the will to fight has not been proven. If anything, the early days of this conflict suggest the opposite. But perhaps the most important question is what happens after the war ends. For decades, the United States has maintained a strategic position in the Middle East as the region's dominant security power. Countries like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Bahrain have relied heavily on American military protection. But this war may fundamentally alter that perception. If those same countries find themselves under missile attack because of their alignment with the United States, they may begin to reconsider whether that partnership truly protects them or exposes them to greater danger. And if that recalculation takes place, it could transform the entire strategic landscape of the region. In fact, I would go even further. I believe there is a real possibility that once this conflict ends, the United States could find itself gradually pushed out of much of the Middle East. The loss of credibility would not stop there. Other regions may begin asking the same question. In South Korea, in Japan, policymakers may quietly ask themselves whether hosting American military forces actually increases their security or creates new risks. This is how geopolitical influence erodes, not suddenly, but slowly, as allies begin to reconsider their assumptions. Now let's talk about economics, because war in the Persian Gulf is not just a regional issue. It affects the entire global economy. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most important energy corridors in the world. Roughly a fifth of the world's oil supply moves through that narrow waterway, and many of America's closest partners depend heavily on that energy. Japan receives about 70% of its oil from the Persian Gulf. South Korea depends on the region for roughly 65%. India and China both rely on it for about half of their imports. If shipping through the Gulf becomes disrupted, even partially, the economic consequences could be enormous. Oil prices will rise. Insurance companies may refuse to cover tankers entering the region. Energy markets will become volatile. In fact, we're already seeing early signs of this. Oil prices have been climbing, and financial markets have started reacting nervously. If the conflict expands or drags on, those pressures will only intensify. And here's another paradox. While the United States and its allies absorb the economic shock, other countries may benefit. Russia, for example, could gain from higher global energy prices and increased demand for alternative supplies. China may find ways to secure energy through different channels. So a conflict intended to weaken geopolitical rivals could end up strengthening them. Finally, we must address the most alarming possibility of all. Where does this escalation ultimately lead? Right now, what we are witnessing may best be described as a low-intensity prelude to a much larger confrontation. If the conflict widens, if shipping lanes are blocked, if additional countries become directly involved, the situation could spiral beyond anyone's control. And once major powers begin colliding in a region, this strategically vital, the risks grow exponentially. That is why the decisions being made today carry enormous consequences, not just for the Middle East, but for the entire international system. History has shown us that wars often begin with limited objectives and confident predictions. But once they start, events have a way of escaping the control of those who launched them. The world may be entering one of those moments again. And if we fail to recognize the dangers now, we may one day look back and realize that the path to a far larger conflict began right here. Thank you for listening.